Hello everyone, and welcome to the Fright Club. I am your master of ceremonies, your hostess with the mostest ghostess, Colin. So here at the Fright Club, we talk, review, and rate anything horror. Remember the 3 rules of Fright Club. Submit your idea of movies we should review and rate and talk about. Subscribe and share. And the 3rd rule, talk about the Fright Club. So, in honor of the releasing of A Quiet Place, I present to you an episode dedicated to the sound of silence. So, silent films were... Oh, it's a little bright in here, don't you think? Alright, wait. Let me try something. Clap off. Okay, there we go. Much better. So, silent films started at the end of World War I. Really, they got their peak. And a lot of people loved going to the movies back then because, well, they were cheap and it took them out of their mundane lives. But people loved the strange and horror the most. There was a period known as the German Expressionist era, and that gave us classics like Metropolis, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, and, most notably, Nosferatu. So also, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari is actually streaming on Amazon Prime, and you can actually go out there and watch it in all of its silent, black and white goodness. And fun fact about Nosferatu, a lot of people wonder why you can't find it anymore. I mean, sure, you can find remakes of it and such like that, but nothing will ever beat the original. Probably something none of us have ever seen, because the grandchildren of Bram Stoker actually sued the maker of Nosferatu for familiarity rights. And, well, they won. So the entire film had to be burned. And no one can get it anymore. Unless, like I said, you get the remake. Anyway, but silent movies are integral to the movies that we watch today because silence can transport you to a very scary place. Alright guys, so silence has been used in many aspects, not just movies, but also TV shows. For example, do you guys remember that old TV show on Nickelodeon that really creeped you out? You know what I'm talking about. It's called Are You Afraid of the Dark? One of my personal favorite shows. So in season 4, episode 6, The Tale of the Quiet Librarian, it's about these 2 kids who end up stuck in a library, and there is this really weird librarian lady walking around with a box, and every time she opens it, you can no longer make a sound. It's not just talking, it's any sound whatsoever. And what she's doing is abducting kids and making them learn in silence. This episode creeped me out completely as a child. And I'm a book reader. I love reading. But anytime that I go to a really old library, all I can imagine is this Victorian lady with a box opening up and stealing everyone's voices. So that is just one aspect, but then we go back into the 90s or the late 90s and early 2000s, and then we have to talk about Buffy the Vampire Slayer, season 4, episode 10, Hush. And here to talk to me about with it is one of my best friends in the entire world, Jessica V. Hey Jessica.
Hello.
So, we're going to talk about Buffy, Season 4, Episode 10. It is the episode Hush. Do you remember that episode?
Oh, yeah. It's one of my favorites.
Excellent. So, I have to ask, what makes this episode unique to the series?
Well, it's unique because none of the characters can speak throughout most of the episode.
Mm-hmm.
And most of it's done in silence.
And
it's terrifying.
Do you think that was like just in a sense it was so unique to the series just because everything has been done with demons that really, not just demons but vampires that completely terrify you by doing all kinds of certain things? What made the gentleman so creepy?
Because they could take away your ability to call for help. I mean, when you think about being in a situation where you're being attacked, most people, their first thing that they would think to do would be to scream for help. And the gentleman take away your ability to do that, and it's terrifying.
That gave me chills. I'm not gonna lie. Just
Yeah.
For someone to take away my ability to cry for help, because you're right, it's a first instinct. So speaking of crying for help, what do you think the scariest part of silence is in the show and also in real life?
Well, I think silence, especially in movies, it's usually used right before some serious stuff is about to happen, right before something climactic and horrifying is about to happen. That's usually where silence is used. I mean, that's always the part in a movie, in a horror movie, when I'm watching it, where once it gets quiet, that's usually where I cover my eyes because I know something's about to jump out and do some damage. But in real life, I mean, silence can be terrifying. I mean, it means you're alone, and sometimes it's scary to be alone.
Yeah, and I have to say, like, for me, and I take this quote from a Pink song, which silence scares me because it screams the truth. And that saying has always, like, because you're right, like, you're alone, and you have nothing but your own thoughts, and some people can't understand what's going on inside of their own heads, and that makes it even scarier. Now, do you think this episode would have worked if the bulk of it wasn't in silence?
Oh, no. No, I definitely don't think that. I think the silence is what made it terrifying. Even with the gentleman, I mean, having such a quiet villain, like, it's, oh gosh, it's terrifying with their creepy grins and all that.
And they were dressed so dapper,
and gliding across the floor and not making a sound. I mean, oh.
And like I have to tell you, like, my favorite part is that they were so polite. They knocked on the door before, like, and that way if you let them in, they're like, "Oh, thank you." And it was the hand gestures. Yeah. It was the hand gestures that when they were passing each other scalpels and doing this whole, no, it's your turn. No, you go. No, it's fine. I have to say about this episode, what Joss Whedon did so brilliantly was that even though you couldn't hear anyone talk, you understood exactly what the gentlemen were saying to each other.
Yeah.
And to me, that is really creepy. So, do you think the episode would have changed any if they were unable to see versus unable to vocalize?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's Joss Whedon, so he probably would have made it pretty terrifying, even with that concept. But,
yeah.
But the whole idea of not being able to scream when somebody is attacking you, especially something as horrific as the gentleman, that I think that's really what made it so terrifying. Silence. Absolutely.
So, Jessica, I want to thank you so much for giving me, your ideas onto our silence episode. Also, everyone out there watching this, I want to let you know that if you love Buffy and you also love other TV shows, especially Buffy though, Jessica is going to have her own podcast out. It's called TVMA, Viewer Discretion Advised. It's her own podcast. She has all kinds of guests on it talking about Buffy and then other TV shows. And let me tell you, firsthand knowledge, it's amazing. And I'm very excited for it to be released.
Thanks, Colin.
No problem. Bye.
Bye.
All right, guys. So now we're going to head into movies. And I love movies. But what I really want to get into about movies is the silence. I'm not talking about silent movies. I'm talking about how silence is used as an integral part in movies to make them just as creepy. So the first on my list is a 1963 classic, and we all should know it by now, Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds. So most of the iconic scenes were all we all remember because they're silent. Think about it. The first scene that I always think of when I think of The Birds is the scene where Tippi Hedren comes out. She's going to go pick up her friend's daughter from the school. And she sits down outside on the bench and she lights a cigarette. And in the background, we have the playground, or the jungle gym back then. And there's one crow on it. But there's silence. And then a little bit later, there's more crows. But there's still silence. All we see is Tippi Hedren smoking her cigarette. And then once again, we go back and we look, and now there are hundreds of crows on the jungle gym. And in that moment, I am covered in chills. It's probably one of the most creepiest things every single time I think of this movie. Now, the next scene that I love is what I call the phone booth scene. So this is the part in the movie where the seagulls have attacked the small area right there outside of the diner. And everyone is getting attacked. The gas station is blow up because for some odd reason people were smoking while pumping gas. Don't ask me. But Tippi Hedren runs into a phone booth. And what I love about this scene is that it was complete silence inside the phone booth. All of this chaos is happening outside. And then BAM! A seagull hits the phone booth. And all you see is the cracked glass. And what I love about it is the fact that you're not sure if Tippi Hedren's character is going into shock, because there's still no sound. And then a man comes up, and he's bleeding from all these cuts on his face, and he's banging on the glass, begging to be let in. But it's like she doesn't hear him. There's complete silence. When I was a kid, I had an argument with my sister. My sister was like, "This is so stupid. There's no sound. I don't get it." And I remember that young thinking, this is what made the movie what it is that silent moment. Because your heart is beating, and you're holding your breath. So, what I love about this movie in general is that the birds win. The birds win. At the very end of the movie, spoiler alert, the main guy's carrying Tippi Hedren to the car, and the entire time there are birds all over the front of the yard. And he's holding the hand of his daughter, and they are tiptoeing to the car. And all you see is a flutter of a bird there or a flutter of a bird over there, and it's complete silence. And you're thinking to yourself, are they going to make it to the car? Well, of course they do, because in the end credits you have a bird's eye view of them driving down the coastal road. But there's never an explanation as to why the birds actually attacked the town, which is why this is one of the scariest horror movies for me, because this could really happen! No one knows why the birds attack. Now, there is the old aviation lady in the bar who does have a theory as to why the birds attack, but nothing's ever proven. This could really happen. Birds could one day just fly down and attack everyone just for the heck of it. So, because this movie scared the bejesus out of me growing up and even doing it now, I'm giving this movie 5 film reels. One of my favorites. Alright guys, so the second film that I want to go ahead and talk about is a great film I'm sure all of you remember because it practically scared the crap out of all of us. A little film called Dead Silence. So, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen it, I don't know why, and really that's your problem. So either click the link, don't, see this, and go see Dead Silence. So, Dead Silence is basically about a guy who lives in the city, and he gets a puppet sent to him in the mail, and then all of a sudden his wife gets killed. So, he takes the puppet back to his hometown to figure out what in the world is going on. And then we get into the case of Mary Shaw. Mary Shaw was a ventriloquist back in the 50s and 60s, and everyone always talks about the ghosts of Mary Shaw and how she's going to rip out your tongue. Well, this dummy, this ventriloquist, belonged to Mary Shaw, so why was it sent to him? Why wasn't it sent there, and did it kill his wife? So this is what we find out during the whole movie. And what makes this movie great for this particular episode is that it makes you be silent for fear that you might lose your tongue if you scream. This movie had a lot of really good jump scares. And a lot of the moments you really have to kind of hold your breath for because you're like, what could happen? Maybe Mary Shaw is going to come for me. Now, I have to say, one of my favorite moments in this entire movie is the police detective played by Donnie Wahlberg. Now, in the film, towards the end, Donnie Wahlberg and the other character are actually going to the old theater that Mary Shaw used to perform at. And while they're walking on the rafters, one of the rafters breaks, and Donnie Wahlberg falls to his death. Now, what ended up happening was that he screams, and Mary Shaw's ghost comes up, yanks him out, and then rips his tongue out and lets his body fall. And why I love this scene so much is because it really makes you think. If you are falling, do you scream? Or do you hold your breath? Maybe his character would have survived. You're really not sure. I mean, it was like a 60-foot drop, or at least that's what it looked like. But just by him screaming sealed his death. And it's actually one of my favorite scenes out of the entire movie. And also, it had a really, really good ending. No one was really sure what Mary Shaw, master plan was, because they go into her background a little bit about how she was a ventriloquist, and someone, a little kid, made fun of her during one of her shows. Well, later that kid went missing, and then his body was found, but it was all strung up like a puppet. And so Mary Shaw was kind of banned, and then people got together and killed her, and yada, yada, yada. So she vowed revenge to get revenge on every single person who had a hand in her death. And your main character is a descendant. So by him coming back, Mary Shaw is going to, get what she had in her death. Yeah, you get my point. But the great thing about this ending is that this guy's father is terminal, and he has this new wife, this young lady named Emma, who helps take care of him the entire movie. But what you find out is that his dad has been dead. Emma is actually Mary Shaw. Emma is a puppet that was made by Mary Shaw, and when she died, her spirit went into Emma. And so now Emma has been controlling his father the entire time by reaching her hand into his back and using her fingers along his spinal cord and then throwing her voice to make him talk. It was an ending that kind of made my jaw drop. The only issue that I had with this movie was that I wanted more background on Mary Shaw. You got a very brief glimpse into her background of when she was a performer, but what made her go crazy? One kid says something during her performance, and she kidnaps him and kills him and turns him into a ventriloquist doll. Why? Why did that particular thing have to happen? Has it happened before? I'm not sure. I've heard rumor that there might be a Dead Silence Part 2, but because there wasn't a lot of information on Mary Shaw's character, I mean, the main ghost of the entire movie, I'd give this movie 4 reels. Alrighty guys, so the final film that I have to talk about is a little ditty called Don't Breathe. Now, this movie came out years ago, and it was huge. A lot of people were like, oh, this changes the face of theater and change of horror movies and yada, 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 yada. And let me just say, once again, spoiler, I loved the first half of this movie. Half of it is what I actually like. So, to give you a little background information on this movie, it is about 3 people who decide to break into a house, and they kind of get into something they were not expecting. Apparently, this house, there's an old man who lives there, and there's a lot of money, and he's blind. So they're going to go in, break in, grab the money, and run. Seems simple. What they don't expect is that this old man, while he is blind, knows how to defend himself. And he actually ends up stalking these characters throughout the film to get rid of them. For basically breaking into the house. It's a home invasion, so I guess you could sit there and say that he's just defending himself. So, when it has to deal with silence is actually used in this movie just so you don't get caught. The old man is blind, so he ends up turning the lights off, and what you don't want to do is make a whole bunch of noise. Now, I will admit, this movie did a great job at getting you not to breathe. During the moments where he was stalking the characters and they were tucked into corners, not breathing and holding their breath, as a viewer, you were right there with them. You were kind of afraid that maybe if you breathed, this guy would come in your direction. But, I have to say, I hated the ending. A lot of people argued about it. They're like, oh, it was the best thing I've ever seen. No, It was really bizarre. At the end of the movie, you have your two main characters, Rocky and Alex, who end up stumbling into the basement of this house. Now, apparently, the old man has been trying the whole time to not get them to go into the basement. So you think he's been leading them around in circles, and he hasn't. He just doesn't want them to go in the basement. Well, why? Well, when they get down in the basement, they find a woman. A woman is in a... what do you call it? She's in like a holster, like a stirrup. And she's tied up. And through background information, and then also through newspaper clippings, they find out that the woman who is tied up in these stirrups is, she accidentally killed this man's daughter in a hit and run. So they, of course, are like, oh no, we gotta release her. So they untie her, and as they're getting out of the basement, the old man comes in with a gun and he ends up shooting the woman. So you're like, okay, well, what's the big deal? Well, he ends up crying over her body and really getting emotional. Of course, as a viewer, you're like, what in the world is going on? Why is he getting so emotional about, this woman who killed his daughter? And then it starts to click. After he gets rid of the Alex character, he kidnaps Rocky, the only female there, and he puts her in the stirrups. And then he cuts into her pants with large shears. And he takes out an infamous turkey baster. Yeah, that's right. You heard me right. A turkey baster. So what he is doing, and this is the reason why he loved the lady who killed his daughter, was because she was pregnant with his child. So instead of getting revenge and all that kind of stuff, he was using his baby gravy to get another child with the woman who killed his. So now he's going to go ahead and use Rocky because, well, she, ended up killing this other lady. And it was bizarre. Alex ended up not being killed, and Rocky ends up taking the turkey baster filled with the baby gravy and stabbing it into the old man's eye. Poetic justice? Maybe. But what I didn't like about this ending was there were so many questions that I had. And I guess it just has to deal with more background. And maybe it was in these newspaper clippings that I just didn't see. Like, how is the old man blind again? What happened? Was it the accident that killed his daughter that made him blind? And my question is, how long since his daughter died? We never really get to know the answer to these questions. And if we do, I must have missed it. Because the second half of this movie, once we found out he's chasing people around with a freaking turkey baster, I was kind of lost. And I was very disappointed. Because like I said, the whole time you're holding your breath, not wanting to get caught. But then it's just an old man with a turkey baster. And it didn't seem that frightening to me anymore. I just kind of lost it. So unfortunately, because of that, I have to give this movie 2 film reels. First half was great, but it's just the last half hour of the movie that killed it and gave it such a low rating for me. If I could give this movie turkey basters, I would, but I can't. But I just can't get that image out of my the whole time. It's so... It is awful. I just don't really recommend the movie that much. I think that what really hyped it was the trailer, because all we see in the trailer is the main girl, Rocky, hiding in a corner, not breathing, getting stalked by some blind man, which sounds awesome. But no, it's really just about a turkey baster and an old man trying to get his daughter back. And for some reason, he chose the woman who killed his daughter as some sort of poetic justice. A lot of it just did not make sense. Shh. Shh, why are you talking? Oh my god, who told you to talk? It's a quiet place. Alright, so we are on to my final film. and I'm going to review A Quiet Place. So if you guys have not seen this movie, I'm going to tell you right now, spoilers, spoiler, Will Robinson, spoiler. There will be spoilers. So what you need to do is get off your computer, stop watching me, go to your nearest movie theater, and watch A Quiet Place. And then come back to me. Are we good? Okay, so you're left or you're here. Either way, we're continuing. So, I would actually like to bring on my guest speaker with me. She's a good friend of mine. We actually saw this movie together, all the way from the Emerald City. Sarah!
Hi. My brothers are not the Lollipop Guild either. Just to let you know.
Those are her uncles. Okay, so...
They're my cousins, thank you very much.
Okay, so Sarah and I saw A Quiet Place together, and so we're going to kind of go through a little bit of it here, and what this movie is about, if you have not really heard anything about it at all, it is about a family kind of going through this post-apocalyptic time. So what has happened is that in the very beginning of this movie, we find a family going to a drugstore, and you have... you know, your mother, your father, your eldest daughter, and then you have your two younger sons. Mm-hmm. And they're at the drugstore because the middle child is really sick and they need medication. And all you see are newspapers talking about how sound attracts them to be quiet. And it's like day 42 since this event. These creatures who attack sound have, I guess we can say, invaded. They kind of look like giant praying mantises with black armor, and it's very interesting. And so what ends up happening in the very beginning of this film is that the youngest son finds a space shuttle toy to play with, and the father takes the batteries out, takes the toy, and was like, no, we can't do this. Mm-hmm. It's going to create sound. And they all speak in sign language. So... what ends up happening is that as they're leaving the drugstore, the daughter feels bad for her younger brother. She is deaf, and she gives him the toy. And the batteries are still on the table. And as they're all leaving, the youngest son, taking up the rear, grabs the batteries and puts them in the toy. And they proceed to walk to home. And they're all barefoot. And there are sand trails to make sure everything is quiet. And unfortunately, the son playing with this toy puts the batteries back in, creates all of this noise, and before the father can reach him, the son is killed by one of these creatures. So that's the beginning of the movie, and then it goes about a year later or so. Mm-hmm. And what I want to get into is the genius of being quiet. So what were some of your favorite moments about this being quiet moments, I have to say?
Basically, how well they use sign language, and even when they did use sign language, the mother and the middle child was still, whispering, mm-hmm. but it wasn't enough to where it would produce enough sound for the monsters to hear them. And just, how close they were with,
Well, now with the sand and everything that they walked on, what they did was that anywhere that this family walked, whether it was on their home property, the farm that they lived on, into the town itself, they would there would be lines of sand that they would have to walk on a straight line too. Mm-hmm. And then one thing that I know that you really liked was the fact that they painted certain mm-hmm. parts of the house. Why?
Yeah, because I think it was they knew which boards were squeaky and which ones weren't, so they painted in the hallway they had where you could step, and then going down the steps there were certain places where you could step. And that was, really interesting. I never would have thought of that. I just would have, ran somewhere real quick.
So we wouldn't have survived, is what we're saying.
Yeah,
so,
basically.
And then also another really cool part of the movie was that they're not the only ones. As a viewer, you don't get introduced, really, to any other characters, mm-hmm. but there's one short, quick scene to where they are using fire signals. So that way, as a viewer, they are not the only people in this town. I believe there are about 4 or 5 other signals of fire to show that, hey, we're still alive. Because this family, they all know sign language. Mm-hmm. And because their daughter is deaf, she has a cochlear implant. And it does not work because these creatures affect electricity in a sense. Things will kind of go out and all of that. So the fact to me that I don't know if this family has it easy or not, just because they can communicate without sound.
Yeah.
And all these other people don't really have that. So to me, and also like when they're playing their board game, like they're doing stuff on like carpets, and they're moving like plush toys.
Mm-hmm.
So all of these things that create a silent world were things that I personally would not have thought of.
Yeah. Yeah, like the father has like all the answers to everything. Like he knows where to go, where not to go, and like
Go ahead. Ladies and gentlemen, that's fine. That's our producer.
Yeah. Continuing on. I lost my train of thought, so go ahead.
Well, so one of the next scene that I want to talk about was that we find out that the wife is pregnant. And it's been about, she's ready to give birth. She is ready to pop.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of controversy with it just because, the daughter gets really upset because she honestly feels that she is the reason her younger brother died because she gave him that toy back.
Mm-hmm.
And her father, she feels that he blames her, and possibly we now have another child into the mix. So one thing that I was thinking about during this movie was like, how do you have a crying baby? So what do they do?
They get this, I don't know what it's exactly called, but it's looks like a wooden box, and there's blankets and pillows and everything. And before this scene, though, you see the mother drag in like this oxygen tank, and it's like, is it oxygen? Is she gonna euthanize it? What is she gonna do? And you see this baby mask, and then when she finally has the baby, she puts the baby in there, puts the mask on, and puts the lid on, and you can't hear the baby crying. So that was like a big controversy between him and I, where is she going to euthanize it, or what's going to happen?
I thought euthanize. Like, that was my thing. I was like, but to me, I was like, if you're going to euthanize a baby that you're going to have, why did you get pregnant in the first place?
Yeah.
Did they not have contraceptives in the future? Or, post-apocalyptic, whatever we want to call it.
Yeah.
Like, why are you even doing anything? So, to me, it's also a genius way. Now, I do not propose putting your children in boxes
yes.
with oxygen tanks, but maybe I do.
I'm pretty sure that's considered child abuse.
Okay, well,
but
then don't.
If you're him, then that's, yeah.
I'm just not a big fan of crying babies. I don't know who is. I honestly don't know anyone in the world who's like, oh, the crying baby sound. I want to listen to this for the rest of my life. Like, I don't know. Like, to me. But so going forward into the movie, we go into a really important part of the film, and it's when the son and the father go on a fishing trip, and the son is terrified. He's literally terrified of everything. Mm-hmm. And we begin to realize, as the father tells us.
Yeah, they're down at the stream, and the father gets a fish, and he goes to like kill it or whatever, and the son freaks out, like making loud noises and stuff. And then I think that's really kind of the start of how you find out like why you have to be quiet and when you can't be quiet. Because then he takes his son to like the waterfall, and they scream as loud as they can, and he tells them it's a safe place. And
it's always a safe place, because if there's a sound that has a higher decibel than what you're physically producing, mm-hmm. these creatures can't hear it.
Yeah.
And that is actually a really important part of the film.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then also it's during this scene, we also see the daughter end up going to the grave of her youngest brother, mm-hmm. To where he was killed. And to me, this is a really important part.
Yeah, because I cried a little bit in this scene, because she has like the little ship, and you can see where it's broke from when like the beast killed him.
Yeah.
And she snips the wires for like the sound, and then she turns it on and lays it on his grave, and she's like laying there on his grave, and like
she feels responsible.
Yeah, she feels responsible for his death. And me being as emotional as I am, I was like crying on that scene. But
it was important to show, like, as a film, like how this family works.
It was how tight they are.
Yeah.
And how close.
And to me, it's very important that when you're doing a movie about a family, even though they're actors in the real world and we know it's fictional, they still have to act like they're not. And to me, that's a really important part. It's not just with the writing of this film, which was genius in itself, but it is the acting of it. But then we go into the birthing scene, which was probably one of the most antagonizing scenes for me personally. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that before the birthing scene, the mom is down in the basement, and the basement is kind of the secret area the kids are not allowed to go. We see a lot of the work that the father has done in the past year. There's surveillance videos all over the place. And we also see that he's been trying to reach other people via Morse code and like other countries.
Good job.
Thank you. Yeah, I've been saying SOSing this whole time, so Morse code's a big word for me. So and so we get to see like all these interesting things that the father has put together, like how many creatures that have been sighted, what are their weaknesses, what are their strengths, and stuff like that. So very interesting to see. But to me, what ends up happening, the most important part, is as the mother is going upstairs with a bag of laundry, the bag gets caught on a nail that is on one of the steps, and she, you know, like any other person does, just rips it up, not really thinking, and the nail is now perpendicular, like just standing straight up. And the entire time, this entire movie, every single time that someone went down the stairs, I was screaming, "The nail! The nail!" Because I was terrified that someone was going to step on it. I don't know if it was like I don't know. I've stepped on nails before. It's not fun.
Wasn't she in contractions too?
Yeah.
When she did that?
What ends up happening is that she goes into contractions and realizing that the baby's coming. And what they do is a signal to each other because the father and son are not back from the fishing trip yet. So what they have done is set up a series of lamps that turn red that, you know, signal that the baby is coming. Or I imagine danger or anything such as that. And as she's going down the basement to go do the lights, you see one of these creatures in the house. And she is going to go hide, and then bam, she steps on that nail. And your heart is racing because I would scream. I mean, who wouldn't scream?
Yeah.
And then we have the fireworks, which is like she goes to hide in a bathtub, which anytime you're in a horror movie, to me the worst place to hide is in the bathroom.
Yeah.
In a bathtub. But it worked. And why was that?
Yeah. When she flicked the red lights on, the father knew that there was danger, and he told his son, I think he signed to him, Rocket.
Yes.
And the son ran into like this cornfield, and he lit the rocket, which was actually fireworks. And this was the best part of the movie for me, because right as soon as the fireworks exploded, she let out her last scream, and the baby was there. That was like
it was the final push.
Yeah.
Because this thing was coming into the bathroom.
Yeah.
And she was holding her breath and trying not to scream and knowing that there's no plausible way to push a baby out of your area without screaming, you know? And so this whole moment you're thinking she's going to get caught, she's going to die.
Yeah.
Something's going to happen.
And she has that blanket.
Yeah.
And it was like, what's gonna happen? And then you hear the fireworks and she screams, and it's like, whew, okay, I can breathe now.
Yeah, so, and then we end up going into kind of what they do. We finally get to see them put the baby in the box. And so we kind of get into those scenes, but then we realize that the kids are missing. And what ends up happening is that this is kind of one of the first moments we see that the father has been working with his daughter's cochlear implants. And he actually did some stuff right because it starts to work. And what ends up happening is that the frequency is affecting the creatures, but it's also affecting her at the same time. And to me, this is probably the scariest part of the whole movie, because what the director did, which was genius in this movie, was that we get to see we get to be behind the character of the deaf actress, and all you hear nothing. You hear complete silence, because that's all she can hear. And you see things happening behind her. You see this monster coming up on her.
And the whole entire time you're like, turn around, oh my god, turn around.
And as a viewer, like, you're holding your breath, but there's nothing anyone can really do. And then all of a sudden, we see that her implant, it starts sending out that signal, that really high-pitched signal that is now affecting this creature, and it's also affecting her.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time she turns around, it's gone. It's ran into the cornfields.
Mm-hmm.
And, that was really important because as a viewer, we realized that these things affect electricity. Any single time they come into contact with something, electrical, or they're around, like, the bulbs will start flashing or the CCTV will start to go out and stuff like that. And now we're noticing that not only do they hate, like, sound is their primary enemy, and it's something that could honestly be used to either injure or kill these creatures.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get to probably the hardest part of the entire movie for me personally. It goes back almost to the fishing trip to where the father and son are coming back, and they, I guess, a neighbor, finally the one person you actually see in this whole movie.
Yeah.
And it's an older man who's probably in his 80s, and he is silently sobbing over a body which you presume to be his wife or loved one of sorts. And you can tell he's about to cry out, and the father is begging him not to do so. And he does, and the creature attacks him. And the entire time I'm thinking, that was stupid.
Yeah.
Why couldn't you just shut up? I mean, you know what's going to happen. Is because you wanted to be with a loved one? Well, that's stupid. But at the end of the movie, the children are in the pickup truck, and they're being attacked by these creatures.
Yeah.
Or by a creature. And this beautiful moment happens.
Yeah, the dad signed to the daughter, I love you, and I always have. And then she realizes what he's gonna do, and then you just see him scream as loud as he can, and this beast just, like, take him out.
It was guttural. I mean, there is no other... And at that moment right there, me as a viewer understood the plight of the older man that they saw earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, it as a viewer, shivers were completely overtaking my body because it was just this moment of relief, in a sense, that the children are okay, but also this father who has really been protecting everyone this whole movie. And he's been doing so many things. And you also get the impression a lot of the designs of the house and everything were up to code by him.
Yeah.
And any single time that something was happening in the movie that produced a sound, he was the first one there to plight it out. Mm-hmm. And without him there, I honestly don't know how they're going to survive.
Yeah, I don't either.
And then we come to the very end of the movie to where you realize, the daughter realizes that they're in the basement. There's one of these creatures, and her cochlear implant, obviously she makes the connection that it's affecting her as well as affecting them. And she puts it up to the intercom, and it basically makes the armor release.
Explode?
Yeah, it kind of releases around them. The mother of the shotgun is like, bam! Like, she finds that entry point to kill the beast. This is the first one they've killed. And there's this moment, a moment that my producer had as well of going, well, we know that sound is the enemy, so why wasn't it used before? I think that is my only qualm about this whole movie, was why no one made this connection that sound is the bigger enemy here, and that sound could actually be used to destroy, because we all know sound is in frequency. It comes in waves, like light. And that was the one thing that I didn't really understand was, I'm not talking about the father, I'm talking about, like, the government, the army, anyone.
Yeah.
No one has realized that this is what we can do, like some sort of amplified frequency sound to destroy these creatures. But I have to admit, for a post-apocalyptic movie, you always see movies about the army and about this and the president and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
This was about a small 5-person family, and you really got to see how they live. Now, I'm going to ask you the same question that's always been asked me, and I'm sure viewers, you've had this question asked yourself. If you could be deaf or blind, which one would you choose?
I would choose to be blind because I need sound to live my life with. I can go without my eyes, but I can't go without sound. Like, hair dryers, music, listening to you talk.
And that's my thing, is that, anytime this question's always asked of me, in high school and so I'd be like, oh, who cares, blah, blah, blah. I would always flip-flop. But after seeing this movie, I need sound.
Yeah, like it brought into perspective how much we all rely on sound.
The little things, and that was exactly what you said, was the perspective of how we use sound just by living day-to-day lives.
Mm-hmm.
And how, I don't know, maybe we should all try to be a little bit quieter.
Like me.
But anyway, guys, I really hope you like the review of this movie. I highly suggest going out there, seeing it, and I'm giving this movie a big rating of 5 film reels, because this movie is absolutely genius. It takes the horror genre, to me, to a whole nother level.
Mm-hmm.
Just because it's taking something away that we produce naturally.
Yeah.
And it's turning that on us. And to me, that is absolutely terrifying.
Yeah.
So, go out there, see this movie, and then also, guys, retweet it, share it, like us on Facebook. You'll find everything in the description below. Also, leave me some comments so I know what kind of movies you want me to watch. Also, let me know what movies you're watching.